Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah, glad to be back.
We are really excited about this one. Today we're going to try and cover the life of a guy named John Ward.
Right?
You might know him as Jack Ward, Birdie, Sparrow,
Lots of nicknames.
Yusuf Freeze.
Wow.
Some people even say that he might have been the inspiration for the Jack Sparrow
Oh, wow, that's really interesting.
from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, I can kind of see it.
So we're going to try and cover his whole life. He starts as an Englishman, a fisherman,
Humble beginnings.
and ends up a Barbary corsair in the Mediterranean in the 17th century.
That's quite a journey.
Yeah, so we're going to be using his Wikipedia page as the main source.
All right, sounds good.
So let's jump in.
Let's do it.
Okay, so John Ward, he was probably born around 1553 in Faversham, Kent.
Okay.
So like, picture this right. Coastal town, probably grew up working in the fisheries.
Yeah, real working class background.
Yeah, just like a normal guy for the time.
Right.
But then things start to change.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, after the Spanish Armada in 1588, good old Queen Elizabeth I, she starts issuing these letters of marque.
Letters of what?
Letters of marque, basically they're licenses to turn regular seamen into privateers.
Ah, so they can legally plunder Spanish ships?
You got it. And Ward, he gets in on this action.
I bet that was pretty lucrative.
Oh, yeah. It was a good time to be a privateer for England.
Yeah.
They were basically harassing the Spanish, messing up their trade, but it was all, officially sanctioned.
A bit of a gray area, though, right? It's like state-sponsored piracy.
You could definitely say that.
So what happened? Did they keep doing that forever?
Well, no, things changed again in 1603 when James I takes the throne.
New king, new rules, I guess.
Exactly. He ends the war with Spain, and suddenly all these privateers, they're out of a job.
Oh, I bet they weren't happy about that.
No, not at all. And all that plundering they were doing. Well, now it's just plain piracy.
From heroes to criminals overnight?
Pretty much, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So for Ward, things get even more interesting around 1604.
What happened?
He gets pressed into service on this ship, the Lion's Whelp, part of the Channel Fleet.
So no more privateering, now it's the Royal Navy.
Yeah, and you got to remember, the Royal Navy wasn't the big deal it is today, but still a king's ship, right?
Right. Can't exactly say no.
Nope. And this is where we get this awesome story from Andrew Barker,
Who's that?
this English guy who ended up captured by Ward later on. Anyway, Barker tells us about this night in a Plymouth tavern. Ward's there, and he's clearly fed up.
I can imagine. Not getting paid much, I bet.
Exactly. Barker even quotes him saying, "My mates," quoth he, "what's to be done? Here's a scurvy world, and as scurvily we live in it, we feed here upon the water, on the king's salt beef, without e'er a pence to buy us a bissel when we come ashore."
So he's basically saying we're risking our necks for nothing.
Yeah, and he's got a plan. He goes on to say, "Revel, sup, and be merry, every one at the proper charge of his own purse. This night, when the captain and officers shall conjecture nothing but that we are drawing dry the pot, we'll be diving arm deep in the fugitives' bags."
So he's going to rob them.
You got it. And he does.
Wow. So what happens next?
So he and his crew, they desert the Lion's Whelp, steal this little 25-ton bark right out of Portsmouth Harbor, and get this, they elect Ward as their captain.
So right away, they're choosing their own leader. That's interesting.
It really is. Shows he had some serious leadership qualities, even back then.
Yeah, he must have really impressed them.
First thing they do, they go after this ship called the Violet near the Isle of Wight.
Why that one? Any particular reason?
Rumor was it was carrying treasure from Catholic refugees, but turned out to be a bust.
Oh, so close.
But Ward, he's a resourceful guy, he uses the Violet to capture an even bigger French ship.
That's smart. Always thinking ahead.
Exactly. And that's kind of how he rolls from there on out.
So where does he go next?
Well, he sets his sights on the Mediterranean.
The big leagues?
Yeah, he gets himself a Dutch 32-gun flyboat, a serious upgrade, calls it the Gift.
Nice name.
He tries to set up shop in Algiers first, but that doesn't work out.
Why not?
Apparently, another English sailor had caused trouble there recently, and his reputation was mud.
Oh, so even in the pirate world, reputation matters.
Big time. So he moves on to Salé in Morocco in 1605.
Did that work out better?
Much better, yeah. He starts attracting more English and Dutch sailors, guys like Richard Bishop and Anthony Johnson.
Building up a real crew there.
Yeah, a real international mix.
Pirates of the world, unite.
Haha, yeah, something like that. Anyway, in the summer of 1606, things change again.
What happens this time?
They capture this dhow in the Strait of Gibraltar. It's supposedly carrying Catholic slaves.
Interesting.
And this leads them to Tunis.
Tunis, why there?
Well, Tunis, along with Algiers and Tripoli, These are the main hubs for the Barbary corsairs.
Right, those were like pirate kingdoms, right? Part of the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah, exactly. They had their own thing going on, and they welcomed pirates, as long as they got their cut.
So it was good for both sides?
Yeah, mutually beneficial, even if it caused a lot of trouble for everyone else.
So Ward sets up shop in Tunis.
He does. He makes a deal with the big guy there, Uthman Dey, the military ruler.
What kind of deal?
Ward gets a safe base of operations, but Usman Dey gets first dibs on all the loot and a 10% cut of everything.
Sounds like a pretty good deal for Uthman Dey.
Yeah, he wasn't complaining, but it was good for Ward, too. Gave him stability, legitimacy.
Yeah, he could really grow his operation now.
And boy, did he ever. In November 1606, he captures an English merchant ship, the John Baptist.
Another English ship.
Yep, and get this, he renames it Little John.
Little John, like Robin Hood.
You gotta maybe a little dig at England, who knows.
Pretty cheeky.
Then his lieutenant, William Graves, captures another English ship, the York Bonaventure.
He's really stepping up his game.
But the real prizes are the Venetian ships, the Ruby, captured in November 1606, and the Carminati, captured in January 1607.
The Venetians, they were rich, right? Lots of trade going on.
Oh yeah, they were the big dogs in the Mediterranean, so their ships were prime targets.
I can imagine, loaded with valuable goods.
Exactly. So now Ward's got a little fleet going.
Yeah, must felt pretty good.
He decides to go after the Adriatic Sea,
Yeah.
but a storm scatters his ships.
That's got to be frustrating.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But Ward, he's not one to give up easily.
So what does he do?
Well, he regroups with the Ruby and they head east.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Oh yeah, this is where the legend of Jack Ward really takes off.
All right, tell me more.
So it's April 26, 1607. They're somewhere between Cyprus and Turkey, and they spot this massive Venetian argosy, the Raniera e Soterina.
An argosy? What's that?
It's like a big, heavily armed merchant ship.
Yeah.
And this one, it was huge.
How huge?
Like 14 or 1,500 tons, the Wikipedia page says.
That's enormous.
Yeah. To give you some perspective, Ward's ship, the Ruby, that was only around 400 tons, and his flagship, the Gift, only 200.
So he's seriously outgunned.
Big time.
So what does he do?
Well, he decides to attack.
You're kidding. That's crazy.
Yeah, crazy brave or crazy stupid, I don't know.
Must have been a hell of a sight.
Oh, I bet it was. The battle goes on for 3 hours.
I can't even imagine.
And here's the thing. The Raniera e Soterina, it's so big, it can't maneuver well in the light winds.
So size isn't everything in a sea battle?
Definitely not. Ward ships, they're smaller, more agile, they're zipping around, staying out of range.
So he's using his weakness as a strength?
Exactly. They managed to do a lot of damage, even set some bales of hay on fire on board the Raniera e Soterina.
Wow, that's clever. Create some chaos.
Yeah, and eventually Ward, he orders his men to board.
That's risky. Boarding actions can be brutal.
No doubt, but they do it. The Venetian crew, they initially decide to fight back. Their captain even hands out weapons.
They're not giving up without a fight.
But then, boom, a volley of chain shot from the Ruby takes out a bunch of their guys.
That must have been demoralizing.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
And at this point, the ship's carpenter steps up, goes to the captain, and basically says, surrender or we mutiny.
Oh, wow. So it's either surrender or get thrown overboard.
Pretty much. The captain, he chooses to surrender, and just like that, Ward captures this massive Venetian ship without any more bloodshed.
What a victory.
Incredible. Right.
Hmm.
And the loot. Well, that's where things get a little fuzzy.
What do you mean?
Andrew Barker, our friend from the tavern story, he claims it was worth $2 million in the least.
$2 million. That's an insane amount of money.
Yeah, back then, that was like unimaginable wealth. The English government, they tried to downplay it, said it was more like 500,000 pounds.
Still a massive haul.
Oh, yeah, no matter how you slice it, Ward hit the jackpot.
So what did he do with all that treasure?
Well, first, you got to imagine the reaction,
I bet people weren't happy.
especially the Venetians. Their ambassador in London was furious, threatened war with England over this whole thing.
I can imagine this is a huge insult to them.
Oh, yeah. He even called Ward the greatest scoundrel that ever sailed from England.
Harsh, but I guess understandable.
And the ambassador also reported that Ward was turning the Raniera e Soterina into a warship with 60 bronze cannons.
Oh, wow. So he's not just a pirate anymore. He's building a navy.
Yeah, a one-man navy taking on Venice.
That's bold.
Bold is one word for it.
What about the English? What did they think?
Well, their ambassador in Venice had to do some serious damage control, assuring the Venetians that Ward would get a warm reception if he ever showed up in their waters.
I bet that warm reception involved a lot of cannon fire.
Most likely. So yeah, this whole thing really put Ward on the map.
He became a legend, a real thorn in the side of the establishment.
Absolutely. So Ward, he goes back to Tunis in June 1607, and he does exactly what the Venetians feared.
He turns the Raniera e Soterina into a warship.
Yep, full 60 guns, the whole
What a
word,
ship that must have
a
been.
real beast.
So what does he do with his new ship?
Well, early 1608, there's these rumors going around that he's dead.
Dead. How?
Some wreckage was found off the coast of Greece. People thought it was the Raniera e Soterina.
So the rumors of his demise were greatly exaggerated.
You could say that. Turns out he's very much alive.
So he cheated death. What next?
Well, things are getting a bit too hot for him, with the Venetians breathing down his neck.
I can imagine.
So he tries to get a royal pardon from James I.
A pardon? After all that?
Yeah, he figured, why not? But no surprise, James I says no.
Yeah, after making that much trouble for everyone, I'm not surprised.
So back to Tunis he goes, under the protection of Uthman Dey.
And I guess that's where he stays.
Well, not quite. This is where things get really interesting.
What, more interesting than all this?
Oh yeah, buckle up. Ward, along with his entire crew, they convert to Islam.
What? Seriously?
Seriously. He takes the name Yusuf Reis and gets the nickname Shakur, or Shagur, which supposedly means something like axe, because he was so good with one back in his pirate days.
Wow, that's a huge change. Why would he do that?
It's probably a mix of things. Strategically, it makes sense, right? Solidifies his position with Uthman Dey, helps him fit in.
Yeah, it makes him one of them, not just some outsider.
Exactly. But it could also be a genuine conversion. Who knows? It's hard to say for sure.
I guess we'll never really know.
But here's another thing. The Wikipedia page says that English converts in Tunis back then weren't forced to be super strict Muslims, so it might not have been as dramatic a change as it seems.
Interesting, so maybe more of a strategic move than a religious awakening?
Could be, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, he sets up another port at Aquileia, or El Houaria.
Oh, expansion.
Yep, he's doing well for himself. He even marries an Italian woman in Tunis.
Wow, so he's really making a life for himself there.
But here's the thing, he also continues to support his English wife back in England.
What? So he has two wives.
Apparently so.
That's something.
It is. Meanwhile, back in England, he's become a bit of a celebrity.
A celebrity pirate.
Yeah, they even write a play about him in 1612 called A Christian Turned Turk.
Oh, about his conversion.
Yep, people were fascinated by him.
Makes sense. He's like a real-life adventure story.
Yeah, and there's this description of him from an English sailor who met him in Tunis in 1608.
What'd he say?
He said Ward was very short with little hair and that quite white, bald in front, swarthy face and beard, speaks little and almost always swearing, drunk from morn till night, the habits of a thorough salt, a fool and an idiot out of his trade.
Wow, not exactly flattering.
Haha, no. But it does give you a sense of the guy, right? Rough around the edges, a real sailor.
Yeah, I can picture him.
And despite all his success in Tunis, back in England, he's still public enemy number one.
I can imagine they're not going to forgive him easily.
Nope, they write ballads and pamphlets denouncing him for becoming a turned Turk.
So he's like a traitor to them.
Yeah, that's basically how they see him.
What does he do about that?
Not much, he just keeps on doing his thing.
Still raiding.
Oh yeah, he's got a whole fleet of corsairs now, and his flagship, that's probably the refitted Raniera e Soterina, 60 guns and all.
He's come a long way from that little bark he stole.
You could say that, but around 1612, he decides to retire from active pirating.
Retire. What does a pirate do in retirement?
Well, Ward, he starts teaching other corsairs, passing on his skills in gunnery and navigation.
So he's like a professor of piracy?
Yeah, something like that. He lives a good life in Tunis, all that pirate treasure keeping him comfortable.
Not a bad way to spend your golden years.
Right. And he lives a long life, all things considered. Dies in 1622, maybe from the plague, at the age of 70.
70? That's pretty impressive for a pirate.
Yeah, he definitely beat the odds. But his story doesn't end there.
It doesn't.
No, between 1609 and 1615, a ton of stuff gets written about him. Plays, ballads, memoirs, pamphlets, you name it.
People couldn't get enough of him.
Nope, they were obsessed. There's a Christian turned Turk, Neves from Sea, Captain Ward and the Rainbow, Andrew Barker's account, all these different versions of his story.
So he becomes a legend, a folk hero almost.
In a way, yeah. And there's even this theory that his nickname Sharky might be where the Royal Navy got their nickname for anyone named Ward.
Really? That's kind of ironic.
Yeah, a little bit. But to his contemporaries, Ward was this really complex figure. Some saw him as a hero, like a Robin Hood of the seas, preying on Catholic ships, but sparing English ones.
I guess that depends on who you ask.
Exactly. But what we do know for sure is that he and another pirate, Simon Danziger, they're the ones who introduced square-rigged ships to the Barbary corsairs.
Square-rigged ships? What's special about those?
They're the ships from Northern Europe. They were much more advanced than the ones the corsairs were using.
Ah, so Ward helped them upgrade their technology?
Yep, and that had huge consequences that made the corsairs a much bigger threat.
I bet the Europeans weren't thrilled about that.
Not at all. And speaking of stories, there's this ballad called Captain Ward and the Rainbow that's almost definitely based on him.
Oh, wow. So he's like a ballad hero.
Yeah, and he also shows up in this novel from 1942, For My Great Folly, by Thomas Costain.
So his story is still being told, even centuries later.
Exactly, it's timeless in a way.
What about that Jack Sparrow connection?
Ah, yes, the big question. Well, in the 2010s, a bunch of Turkish newspapers and even BBC History magazine, they all started suggesting that John Ward could be the inspiration for Jack Sparrow.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's some similarities, right? Both roguish, resourceful, kind of charming in a way.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, Jack Sparrow is obviously fictional, but it's cool to think that he might be based on a real person.
And a pretty amazing person at that. I mean, from humble fisherman to a powerful corsair, it's quite a story.
A real rags to riches, except the riches were stolen.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's one way to put it.
So what do you think? Is there a connection?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's a fun thought, isn't it?
Mm.
And it just adds another layer of intrigue to this already fascinating life.
Definitely. I mean, it makes you wonder how much of our popular culture is rooted in real history.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that sometimes truth is stranger than fiction.
Absolutely. John Ward, what a life.
What a life indeed. And on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive. We hope you enjoyed learning about John Ward, the possible inspiration for Jack Sparrow.
It's been a great journey.
And if you want to learn more about piracy and the Barbary corsairs, well, keep exploring. There's a ton of fascinating stuff out there.
You never know what you might find.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
See you then.
Bye.